Welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast with your host, Buck Fantastic.
Girl Scout cookies.
After the last heavy podcast episode on the 2022 West Virginia election, I thought I needed to take my listeners on a more calm, sedating journey. An expedition far, far removed from fake-ass progressive activists and worthless fence-sitting politicians. A nostalgic joyride to TV land. Are you a fan of the Golden Girls? Do you get the pop culture references in the classic TV sitcom? On this episode of the Mothman, the Bible Belt podcast, I have West Virginia author Matt Browning, who painstakingly watched every single episode of The Golden Girls twice, dissecting every pop culture reference for his 2021 book, The Definitive Golden Girls Cultural Reference Guide. Browning is going to discuss his current book on the Golden Girls, past literary works, his life and adventures, and whether or not coal miners are sexy. Join me, your host, Buck Fantastic, for another exciting episode of the Mothman of the Bible Belt podcast, because reading is fundamental and some bitches need read. Matt, you've written 3 books: Bookstore Explorer, West Virginia, the children's book, Chicks and the City, and last year you put out the Definitive Golden Girls Cultural Reference Guide. When you grew up, did you have any idea you'd ever become a published author?
Yes and no. I knew that I enjoyed writing from like the time I was about 14. Sort of like poetry and song lyrics, even though I'm not a musician, and tried to dabble in short stories a little bit. So I had the interest, but I don't know that I really put serious thought into it being maybe a career until I was probably in high school and had a great teacher who kind of really well, that's all we did in her class was read and write. So she really encouraged me and made me think, huh, maybe I could do this. But then another probably 10 or 12 years went by before I actually started trying to do it.
You released the Definitive Golden Girls Cultural Reference Guide last year. Several books have been written about the iconic 1980s, early 90s sitcom. What sets your book apart from the others?
Oh, that's a good question. I have been watching The Golden Girls since it was new in the 80s. I was little, but I watched it. Um, and in so many ways, it's timeless, right? It's like I Love Lucy. It's going to be around forever. But it was a very observant show. And there's a lot that anchors it in the 80s because they make so many dated jokes and references to pop culture, people and politics and places and things. Um, and I would always like they'd make a joke and I would be like, well, who was that? Who was so and so? Let me Google that and see who that was so I could get why the audience found it so funny. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if there was a book that explained all of these pop culture jokes in one place and you could maybe follow along as you watch the show? And I started searching and it didn't exist. Like you said, there's tons of Golden Girls books out there, but none of them were doing that. Nobody had done that. So I thought, okay, I'll just write one. And that's what I did.
Do you think many 20-somethings get the pop cultural references in the Golden Girls?
No, a lot of the people that I see buying the book, they're either, 20 or 30 something years old, or it's like the parent or grandparent buying it for their kids and grandkids because they say they don't know who so and so was. They don't know who Danny Thomas was. So, yeah, I would say a lot of younger people don't know a lot of those jokes.
How many times did you have to watch each Golden Girls episode to compile the pop cultural reference guide?
Well, I've seen them all hundreds of times, but for the sake of the book, and not that there's a silver lining to the pandemic, but if there was to my experience of the pandemic, it gave me time during quarantine to work on this book because we sold the book in, I think, February of 2020. And of course, as you know, a month later, the world shut down. So I was at home. Um, So what I did for the book was I watched each episode starting from the first and watched it all the way through 2 times. And I would handwrite on a notepad the references that I knew I needed to look up, afterwards. So by the time I finished, I had a very thick notebook full of references to go research. So yeah, 2 complete watch throughs of 180 episodes apiece.
Did watching the Golden Girls nonstop cause you to develop a craving for cheesecake and Italian food?
I don't maybe no more than I always want such things. Um, but and it was funny too. Somebody gave me I guess for Christmas maybe. There's a Golden Girls cookbook that's like officially sanctioned by I think Disney owns the Golden Girls, and it's full of the recipes. So yeah, during the time we were making some of those recipes too to try and really get into the spirit.
How long did it take you to write the book?
So like I said, the first thing I did was handwrite the references and watch all episodes 2 times through, which I guess took several months because I mean I had a day job too, right? It wasn't like I was just sitting all day watching Golden Girls,
Mhm.
but that is what kind of my weekends especially looked like there for quite a while. So then after the 2 watch throughs, then became like the researching and writing process. I'm old enough to where I knew a lot of the jokes myself and could write them because I know it, but a lot of them too I didn't know and I had to research. So then, of course, it's writing, editing, and da 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 da. So we sold it, I think, in January or February 2020, and they gave me until the end of the calendar year 2020 to turn it in. So I had almost a year to write it, but I think I got it to my editor around Thanksgiving of that year. So what's that, like 10 months?
Did you have to go through a ton of legal hurdles to get the book completed?
Did I? No, but I think my publisher did whatever they do. Somebody else asked me that too because, I've done 3 books and each one has been done differently. I self-published one. I worked with a regional author or a regional publisher here in West Virginia for the second one, and then this one was with sort of a larger. Um, they're a company of Roman and Littlefield, which is a big publisher. So all of that was luckily out of my hands. Um, I just turned in the manuscript and they did their thing. But I will say, um, working with a publisher like that, I didn't have any say in like the design and how the book looked and what pictures were going to be used or anything like that. So the only picture in the book is the cover picture. So I assume they went through the process of getting the rights to that one. Because I would have loved to have seen a whole book full of photos, but you got to pay Disney for that stuff. And Disney needs its money.
Yeah, I figured it wouldn't be cheap using those pictures, even little stills.
I know. I'm sure it's not. I've never tried to figure out how much it costs because I would probably want to cry, but I'm sure it's
Yeah.
not cheap.
Did you have to go into debt just to write the book?
No, when you self-publish, or even the second book with a regional publisher, there were some upfront costs to me. But this one, luckily, working with a bigger publisher, they do all of that. So to create the book, no, I mean I just had my Hulu subscription that I paid for to watch the show. But now on the
Yeah.
back end, when the book comes out, like if I do signings and stuff, like if I have to travel somewhere, that's on me. I did get with the deal a small, I guess stipend would be the word that
A
covers part of
commission?
that. Yeah. Um, but I'm sure I've eaten that up now.
Did you have to fast or get caffeined or sugared up to write the book?
um, since I already live on coffee, not really. No. And it's the Golden Girls, it's comfort food. So it wasn't demanding. It was an enjoyable process. But I did joke at the beginning. I was like, "Oh, I've managed to turn watching Golden Girls into work. Ha 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 ha." Only to discover pretty quickly that this is work.
Yeah, the writing and the editing is the bitch. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Watching
knowing
the
you're
show was,
getting everything verbatim.
and I'm still worried that I missed some because I knew there would be a lot of references, but I had never watched for the sole purpose of finding them. And when I realized how many there were, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is not as easy as I thought."
Yeah. What's your favorite Golden Girls episode?
I'll give you 2. And I was just at a big Golden Girls convention and I was doing a panel with a guy named Jim Colucci, who's a pretty big entertainment writer, and he wrote a great Golden Girls book. And his answer to this is much better than mine because he had a real deep, profound explanation. But my two favorites are just my favorites because they're funny. And one is called It's a Miserable Life, which is about the old lady named Frida Claxton who lives across the street. And she's just a cantankerous old bitch. Have you seen that one? They want to tear down a tree on her property, or she wants to tear down an old oak tree on her property, and all the neighborhood wants to save it. So they're kind of battling this mean old lady, and she ends up killing over dead, and hijinks ensue. That's my favorite episode. And my other favorite episode is called Isn't It Romantic? And it's about Dorothy's best friend comes to visit who's a lesbian. Um, but it was the 80s, so she wasn't necessarily very open about it. But she comes to visit and she sort of develops a crush on Rose, and and again, hijinks ensue. But those are my two favorites, and I wish I had a deep, profound answer as to why, but it's just because they're so damn funny.
I like that one where Blanche is having the dream about her husband coming back and Sonny Bono's in it.
Oh,
That was
that's a good one.
hilarious.
Sonny Bono, get off my lanai is one of the famous lines from that episode. The
And I
guy who
like
I was talking about Jim Colucci, his favorite was the one where Sophia's son dies. So it's sort of a funny yet somber episode, and it ends on sort of a downbeat instead of a joke. And
but that was way ahead of its time.
oh
Way
yeah,
ahead of its time.
that's one thing. Even if you watch it today, to think, wow, they were doing this in the '80s. Holy shit! But a lot of what they do is still relevant today. So we've come a long way, but we have so far to go, right?
Hmm. So you were a panelist at the Golden Con. Thank you for being a fan convention in Chicago last month. Did you
Yes.
get to connect with a lot of Golden Girls fans?
Oh my God. So they had about 3,000 people there, first of all.
Phew.
Yeah, it's the
Were they
first.
masked?
Um, they made it optional, and I would
Oh.
say probably 80% were not masked. Um, I wore my mask as much as I could, but unfortunately, still came home sick. Because I was participating in panels and stuff, so I wore it as much as I could, but you had to take it off sometimes. Um, but to answer your question, there were 3,000 devoted, crazy, fun fans there, many in costume. And I'm not talking just Golden Girls costumes. There were plenty of those, but like deep cut episode guest star costumes, like nuns walking around. There was an episode with a nun in it, and there were just nuns walking around. And I got to be treated a little like a VIP, and get to hobnob with some of um, the guest stars. The cast is all dead now, but the guest stars and the writers and the producers and all of those kind of people, like hanging out backstage. And I'm like, how's this my life?
Did you get any dirt on any of the Golden Girls after talking with some of the guest stars, or because
um,
you hear how Betty White was supposedly a bitch and B. Arthur hated her. You don't know if it's true because egos get in the way on a show like that where you got four strong female characters.
yeah, there is some truth to the Betty didn't like, or to the B didn't like Betty rumors. I mean, I think it's one of those you might not like your sister, but you love her because she's your sister kind of deal. Um, but oh, Betty is as good as gold and is just what you hope she would be. Is the universal feedback you get on Betty White. Thank God, right? If it came out that Betty White was a monster, I don't know
Well,
if
a
there
few
would be
years
no press.
ago, well, a few years ago, there was a story that came out saying that she didn't pay one of her workers, and I don't know what happened with that. I think last I checked, that was still hung up in the courts, even after she died.
Oh
So,
wow, I was hoping she'd outlive us all, but she didn't
yeah,
quite make it.
but
I don't know
she
that
a
I got
hundred,
other. Yeah, she was like right on the tip of 100, wasn't she?
yeah,
I don't know that I
near.
get any other super scoop. The one bad thing about selling my books was that I had to sit at my booth like almost the whole time. So I missed a whole lot of the sessions, but there was some really, really cool things going on. And I did get to see some of them and meet some really great people. Um, so even though I got sick, it was worth it.
Were you shocked none of the stars of the two Golden Girls porn parodies were invited to the Golden Con Thank You for Being a Fan convention. You'd think Nina Hartley would have been on the panel. On a panel, she's done mainstream work. Nina starred as Rose in the 2015 Hustler release, This Ain't the Golden Girls Triple X.
I'm surprised to say I wasn't aware of those movies. Um, and you know what? Maybe they were invited. I don't know. Because I did hear this. There were people that they were trying to reach out to that just couldn't make it. So maybe that was some of them. I don't know. Plus, I'm pretty sure they're going to do it again. So, you know,
The
maybe they'll.
trailer, the G-rated trailer is hilarious. They took the theme song instead of "Thank you for being a friend," it was "Thank you for fucking my friend." Granny pussy don't mean it's the end. You have to check it out. It's on Daily Motion, the G-rated version,
Okay. Well, I
the
will tell
G-rated
you
trailer parody.
the
I couldn't stop from laughing. I couldn't stop from watching. It's just so effed up. But
I don't think the crowd that was at Golden Con would have. I think they would have loved that. It was that kind of crowd. So I'll keep that in mind and tell the folks about it for next year.
did you get to meet Monty Markham, who played Blanche's gay brother Clayton Hollingsworth?
He is like the only. There was one or two of them that I didn't get a chance to really have a conversation with, and he was one, and Hillary Shepard was the other. She played Yvonne, the aerobics instructor. I didn't get the chance to chat with them. I did meet and chat with the lady who played young Dorothy when they would flash back to the 50s. Her name was Lynn Green. Great, super nice lady. Um, I met the gentleman who played Mr. Ha Ha the Clown in an episode. Um, he was a very, very nice guy. And when I said I'm from West Virginia, he was like, "Oh, you're in Joe Manchin territory." And I was like,
Oh,
let's change the subject. Um,
awkward.
they were super nice. I met, well, I had interacted with Dinah Manoff, who starred on the spinoff Empty Nest, but I got to spend a lot of time with her, and she's super duper nice.
You created the fan website for Empty Nest, didn't you?
I did like 25 years ago. I was like 17, 18. And even back in the 90s, like the Golden Girls fan love online was crazy.
Hmm.
Not like it is now, but back then we had like chat rooms and all of that kind of shit. Um, and the Golden Girls love was crazy then, but there wasn't much Empty Nest love. And then when I was a kid, they were a package deal. You watched one, you watched the other. And I was like, why doesn't anybody do a website for Empty Nest? And I forget
And
who it was.
you didn't do one for nurses. I
You
love
know,
that one too.
there's a nurses section on my Empty Nest website. But somebody was like, yeah, why don't you just make it? And I'm like, well, okay. You're 18, you don't think. So I just did it and it took off. And people started sending me like all of this shit. And I've interviewed the cast and done all kinds of cool stuff. It's on my resume.
Rue McClanahan's psychic niece, Amelia Kincaid, known for her role as possessed goth witch demon Angela in the Night of the Demon movies, was also in attendance. Did you get to meet her?
I did not. I forgot that she was another one I didn't get to meet. I have not seen those movies. Have you seen those
You're
movies?
kidding me.
I don't remember
They're
any horror
independent.
movies.
They're independent horror movies from the late 80s. I think the last one was 96, 97. Night of the Demons 3. They were really great. Night of the Demons, the original, it's on Tubi TV, and I think it's on Pluto as well. But it's the 80s. It was over the top, a little campy, but I mean,
Is
it
she
was,
good in them?
yeah.
Is she?
I mean, she goes from good to great. I mean, the second one is flat out campy. You got a nun with nunchucks fighting a demon. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. I was just curious if you met her because I love those movies. And again, I heard that she was Rue McClanahan's niece, and I figured
Um,
she had all kinds of nice things to say because you don't hear anything bad about Rue McClanahan.
you don't. And her mother was there too, Rue's sister. And again, they did sessions that I didn't get to sit in on. But she is also, and I could be getting this wrong, but I think she's like a pet psychic or something.
Hmm.
Because she did a session on that at the Golden Girls convention. But again, I was tied up at my booth and missed it.
She's like Sonia.
Yeah,
She
I
talks to
got
the
to
animals.
like I got to in the green room because I was so fancy and a big deal. We said hi, but I didn't really get a chance to have a conversation with her.
What's your thoughts on a Golden Girls reboot? It's been talked about for years.
Before the pandemic, I had read that Jane Lynch and Cyndi Lauper were working on sort of a sitcom Golden Girls ish kind of setup, which I would love to see because I love Cyndi Lauper and anything.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, hey, I'm all for it if they could do it justice.
But do they really need to reuse the characters?
Probably
Or
not.
do you-
No, I think if they just reused the setup of four older women living together, which I guess they did a little bit with Betty White's other show, Hot in Cleveland, and that
Mhm.
was a cute show. I watched that. I was telling somebody the other day I read something about a Facts of Life reboot, and I'm like, well, Tootie, Natalie, Blair, and Joe should just live together like the Golden Girls because they're like 50 something now themselves. So there you
Mhm.
go. Let's just do that one.
Did you ever get to meet Betty White when she came to Charleston?
No, I wish.
Same
Um,
here.
I didn't get to meet any of the actual four actresses. I met most of the Empty Nest gang because they're a lot younger and still around. But I unfortunately didn't get to meet any of the Golden Girls. I get that question a lot too when I do book signings.
All the Golden Girls are dead. How do you think the show has stood the test of time? It's on several television channels and streams on Hulu.
Isn't it crazy? One of the questions people were saying, or one of the things that kept coming up was, did you ever think 30 plus years later you would be at a fan convention solely for this show with costumes galore running around? And they were all like, no. Um, what makes it stand the test of time? I think it all starts on the page, right? If the writing's not there, it doesn't matter. If you have Sir Laurence Olivier, it's not going to soar. But I think the actresses, what they brought to what was on the page, the chemistry of the four of them, and the issues that they dealt with are timeless. Like I said before, even as dated as a lot of the jokes were, we don't mind that. We still watch it and laugh because it's just so damn good.
Did COVID-19 put a damper in you promoting it last year?
Yes. It came out at like peak Omicron wave. Um, so I did a few things here and there, but I really didn't get to do like a tour. So I'm trying to make up for that this spring and summer. So yeah, right now I'm doing a whole string of events. Got some dates in North Carolina coming up. Got one in Virginia, one in Maryland and Delaware. Never been to Delaware. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to get back out there now. Cause
Will you
yeah,
be tabling at this year's West Virginia Book Festival on October 21st and 22nd at the Charleston Coliseum and Convention Center?
funny you should ask. I just got confirmed that yes, I will have an exhibit there.
And you'll
And
be
that
signing autographs.
Yes, as a writer in West Virginia, that's been like a bucket list item of mine, and I got accepted in 2020 when the bookstore book came out, and of course they canceled it. I was supposed to actually do like a session at that one on that project, then it got canceled. Then in 2021, I was supposed to come again, and they just went virtual. So I'm supposed to be there in 2022. Let's cross our fingers, and I'm ready.
With Bookstore Explorer West Virginia, you wrote about indie bookstores in West Virginia, which are far and few. What prompted you to write a book on the subject?
So I have a travel hobby of visiting independent bookstores. A lot of people are like foodies, right? And they go looking for their best restaurants. I go looking for independent bookstores um, because I love to read and I love to walk into a bookshop and not know what I'm going to find. It's like a treasure hunt. And an indie bookshop gives you an idea of community. They've really become community hubs. So if you want to get a sense of what a new town's like, step into the local indie bookshop. So I was doing that when I would travel, like for my last job, I would travel some, and I was blogging about it and Instagramming about it, as we all do about everything nowadays. And I thought, I wish there was a book in here. And then I started thinking, well, West Virginia is small enough to where I could drive it myself and visit everyone in the whole state. Um, and then I thought, but are there enough bookshops in West Virginia to put a book together with? My first thought was probably not. But once I started researching, there was like 20 to 30 around 30, I think.
And that's just the G-rated ones, right?
Yeah. That's the G-rated ones and like the non-chain bookstores. Um, and I was a little bit liberal, like if there was like a flea market with a big book vendor, for instance, or like an antique shop that specialized in books, those made the cut. And so that's what I did in 2018 was drove from top to bottom of the state and went to every bookshop I could find and sort of talked to the owners and got the story of the shop and what makes them want to run a bookshop and what do they think of bookshops in the age of Amazon, da, 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 da. And I had some other writers and people contribute essays about it too. Um, and it came together quite nicely. And then it came out right at the tip of uh, the pandemic.
Have many of those bookstores closed as a result of COVID?
You know, you might anticipate my answer to be yes, we lost a lot. Um, and we did lose a couple. We've only lost, the last time I checked, I think two. But guess what? We've gained like six.
Wow.
6 indie shops have opened in West Virginia. Well, one's about to open in Barbersville. Um, and I think the pandemic just showed a lot of us don't waste time. If you have a passion, maybe go for it. And maybe these people have always wanted to open bookshops, so they just said, hell with it, I'm going to do it. I'm just guessing here.
Mhm.
But yeah, we've gained more than we've lost, which I'm very excited about.
How much did you spend on gas and lodging just to write that book?
Oh God,
Do
I
you
don't
think?
know. Gas, I don't know. Probably a lot. This was 2018, so it wasn't as expensive quite as it is now. Um, but as far as like lodging, you try to find your friends to stay with, or you call in favors, or you try to like cram as many visits into a day trip as you can. I only had to stay overnight a couple of times, so I didn't break the bank on lodging, but yeah, gas was probably because there was a shop in Wheeling, which from Charleston to Wheeling's not a very short drive. That's one of the furthest away. Um, and the owner was very, very ill, so it was tough to find that shop open. So I had to make a couple trips up there before I could actually get into the shop.
I briefly met Chicken Stew at the West Virginia Urban Agriculture Conference. He got his own book, Chicks and the City. What inspired you to write it?
I don't have children and I'm not around children much, so I never intended to be a children's book author. But it was that conference you were talking about. So I worked at the time at West Virginia State University that was hosting the Urban Agriculture Conference. And my former coworker and I we would do the marketing and we came up with the character of Chicken Stew, a little chicken with a necktie. And we sort of personified him like a traveling gnome or Flat Stanley kind of deal. We even found a little doll and we just took him around the city of Charleston and it took off and was popular. And I thought to myself, the story that we invented as Stu's backstory for this conference would make a neat children's book to show little kids, that it's never too early to learn about farming and gardening. And we just took Stu from the farm to the city and he discovers the way that gardening happens in cities. Um, so I wrote the words to what became a picture book and found a regional publisher called Headline Books and worked with one of their illustrators, and brought it to life. And I was very happy with the final product.
Got it.
And if you notice on the cover of the book is Chicken Stew sort of standing in the middle of a city street with the city behind him.
Hmm.
And I didn't learn until much later that the illustrator I worked with, Ashley, she told me that she was really struggling to find a creative cover image. And she was in the process of getting married and was planning her wedding. And they took a picture of her in her wedding gown standing in a city street with the city behind her. And her mother was like, that should be the cover of the Chicks in the City book. And it was. So it was based on her own wedding photo.
You got semi-famous a few years back.
I
You
did.
dressed up for Halloween as Tanya Tucker, and she reposted your pic on her Facebook page.
She did.
Yes. You didn't see that?
I did. I did. I was very excited about it. I've been a Tanya Tucker fan since I was like 8 years old. Because when I was growing up, I grew up in Logan County, and we didn't have in like the '80s, we didn't have MTV. We had CMT and TNN, so the country stars were what I visually saw, and she was my favorite. I don't really follow country music much today, but I still follow people like Tanya, who had a great comeback a couple years ago
Mhm.
and started winning Grammys finally. And I'm
Mhm.
known for Halloween. Every Halloween, I try to do something a little unexpected because I'm kind of a reserved person, right?
Mhm.
But on Halloween, I kind of step out of that. Like one year, I was Dorothy's Bornak, and a friend of mine was Sophia. She always tried to do something a little unexpected. And yeah, the Tanya one was definitely my biggest exposed one because yeah, she reshared it.
I
That was
love
fun. I've
Tanya
kind
myself.
of she's got a new
Um,
record. She's working on a new record right now, and I can't wait.
I'm hoping the next one's a little bit more like the early '90s. I mean, the last one was a little bit more traditional in the
Hmm.
way it was put together. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that a lot of Tanya Tucker fans are, I guess, I guess they were expecting more of the pop edge that she had out in the late '80s and early to mid '90s when she made her big comeback. You know, after
That's true.
having
This one was sort of Americana kind of vibe
yeah.
to it, I guess. But yeah, that I loved that well, that '80s '90s country was what I grew up on. You know, the Judds, of course, they're unfortunately in the news for some sad reasons right now, but those are the
Mhm.
people I grew up on. You know, so I'd love to see Tanya come back out with the big teased hair and the and the plugged in kind of sound.
You're from Logan County. What was life like growing up in the Southern Coalfields?
Oh gosh, what a question. Let's see. How do I answer that one? My take on it in the '80s, I loved it. It was a great place to grow up. It was the kind of place where, you know, as cliche as it sounds, you could leave your door unlocked or you'd sit on the porch and your neighbors come by and unannounced kind of deal, but you didn't care. You always had something for them. And um, you'd go downtown. Logan's a very small little downtown, but the storefronts were alive and people were walking about. And that's what I remember. That's what I love. Um, I left Logan around the year 2001 or two. And I came to Charleston, which is like a little over an hour away, but still, you would have thought I crossed an ocean coming from little Logan. And you go back now, and I don't know, it doesn't have quite the same vibrancy in my mind that it did when I was a kid. And I've heard others say the same thing. And I think that's, well, there's a lot of documented reasons for why that happens, but it was great to grow up in. I don't know I'd want to live there now.
Did you ever contemplate working in a coal mine?
No, I did not. I admire the people that can do such a job, um, but it wasn't for me. I was more of the bookworm, and it's probably difficult to read down in a coal mine. I did go to the Beckley Exhibition coal mine on a school field trip when I was little. Did you ever do that?
No, thankfully, no. I'm claustrophobic. That would have killed me.
That probably would have. It wasn't. You rode on this big giant cart thing. Um, so you were seated in like it was almost like a ride at an amusement park the whole time. Um, but yeah, you did go into a coal mine, and I'm making air quotes, listeners.
In the doc, The Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia, coal mining is depicted as a sexy profession. Pay for coal miners has declined since that film was shot and released. Jobs in coal mining have also decreased in the state. Is there anything sexy about coal mining?
So the first book, so I'm going to spin this into writing territory. Um, my intent was to be a young adult fiction writer. Um, so the first novel I wrote was this sort of little queer coming of age, coming out story. Um, it never sold because I think in like 2012 we weren't wanting that, but now everybody's wanting it because of Heartstopper. I'm like, where was this excitement 10 years ago? But in that book, the first scene, my what was he, 15 or 16-year-old protagonist was waiting on the school bus, and he's watching his neighbor pull in from a night shift in the coal mines, and he's just like quietly, secretly lusting after his older neighbor who's covered in coal dust. So I guess to answer your question one way, I guess maybe there is, in that sense, to talk real economics. I don't know that I want to. My answer might shift.
Where can people purchase your books at?
They can start at mattbrowningbooks.com. The bookstore book, gosh, it's a little dated because, like I said, it came out in beginning of 2020, tip end of 2019. And it's available in a lot of the indie bookstores throughout the state. And this is going to sound super duper terrible of me, but you can order it from Amazon. I know, I'm sorry. And somebody was like, why are you selling a book about bookshops on Amazon? And I'm like, I did a lot of research, and as an independent seller, I mail it
Can
and
you
sign.
buy it at Taylor Books?
I think so. I've had it there. I haven't checked to see if they have any in stock. But if you do order from Amazon, like, it comes from my house. I do all the sales and shipping myself.
Do you autograph the books?
Uh-huh. And I've also made a little QR code label for the front because, like we've said, some things have changed since the book came out. So I did a blog post that updates where we are now in West Virginia. So I've been sticking the QR code in the front. The children's book you can get also on Amazon and in shops, or you can order from the publisher, Headline Books, which I guess is headlinebooks.com probably. And the Golden Girls book, where it's with a bigger publisher, you can get it wherever books are sold. You can go to target.com and find it if you wanted to.
A better choice. Do you got another
go to
book?
bookshop.org.
Do you got another book in you, Matt?
I have got about 6 or 7 or 8 or 15 unfinished manuscripts on my computer. But so we're taping this in mid-May. We just last week went out on submission on a new book proposal. And I won't give too much away. I'll give you a premise though. So like I've made it clear that I love independent bookstores and I go to them whenever I travel. And I've been to lots and lots and lots. And I counted up just the ones I blogged about, and there's been over 100. And I thought to myself, I've learned quite a bit over these years about what makes bookstores such cool, wonderful places. So we're putting together a collection of essays with all of the cool things and experiences I've had in all of the independent bookshops I've visited. So that's the project that's out on submission right now. Cross your fingers that we sell it quick, and I get to write another book about bookshops.
Do you think digital books are going to replace the physical book?
Absolutely not. Now, do I own a Kindle? Yes. Do I use it very often? No.
I just find these things slow when I'm using, like I was reading your book, The Golden Girls Reference Guide, on my phone. It's just really slow. It's not as easy to navigate as a regular physical book, in my
It's
opinion.
not. And I love, the smell of book paper and the feel of it in your hands. Well, a book like The Golden Girls Reference Guide, I mean, if you want to flip back and forth to the index and blah, 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 that would take you forever on a digital device. But no, I don't think digital will replace real books. And in fact, a lot of actual brick and mortar bookshops have opened during the pandemic. Like lots of them, a surprising amount have opened up during the pandemic. So yay, support your local bookshop.
Is there anything else you want to say about the definitive Golden Girls cultural reference guide?
If you've ever watched the show and thought, well, who in the hell is Danny Thomas? Why is that so funny? Or who is Fess Parker? And why does B. Arthur look like Fess Parker in heels? Was the joke. And if you ever said, well, who the hell is Fess Parker? Get this book because it'll explain that and more.
Wasn't this podcast episode more relaxing? I'd rather talk pop culture than politics any day. Though The Golden Girls is a very political sitcom, the show tackled women's rights, homelessness, sex-positive feminism, slumlords, HIV/AIDS, LGBT issues, and growing old in America. For more information on Matt Browning and to purchase his books, check out his website at mattbrowningbooks.com. I want to thank my special guest, Matt Browning, for coming on my podcast to talk about his books. And remember, folks, COVID-19 isn't over. Unless you have an endless supply of paid sick leave and the immune system of Superman, keep masking. And if you haven't got vaccinated, get vaccinated. You can find Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast outlet updates, guest bios, and direct links to social media on my website at mothmaninthebiblebelt.com. Thanks for listening.